What up, this is Rama Screen covering movies, TV, and entertainment, and here's my review of the entire Season 1 of Amazon Prime's new series, Carnival Row. Hey, before you watch this review, please subscribe to my channel, press that like button, and ring that bell so you can get notified whenever I post new videos. And if you would like to help support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/ramascreen. That's patreon.com/ramascreen. Let's rock this. First up, I would like to say thank you to Amazon Prime for granting me the screeners to all 8 episodes of this new show. This is gonna be a spoiler-free review. So again, I will not be spilling spoilers in this video. Now, this series is actually based on Travis Beacham's old script, but I'm kind of glad that the movie never got made and it became this series instead. You know how it is when you come across a movie that's so substantive and so stimulating, you just feel it in your gut that the story would have been better served if it had been done episodically, so as to flesh out more of the arc and the characters and give them justice, as opposed to something that is condensed into a less than 2 hours packaging. Well, you don't need to wonder the same about Carnival Row because this one is handled correctly, in my opinion. I would describe Carnival Row as Pan's Labyrinth meets Deadwood meets Penny Dreadful, and you'll understand why I use those shows as comparison once you've seen Carnival Row. It's got fascinating imagery of fantastical elements such as fairies and centaurs and fauns, got prostitution, and it's got carnage. This show is visually stunning and beautiful to look at, especially the designs for the creatures that just capture my attention. The CG effects for the fairy wings, for example, as they fly, are remarkably well done. The Victorian era costumes and set production are the stuff that many period piece fans and cosplayers everywhere will be geeking out about for years to come. For the most part, Carnival Row is a serious, heavy, and dark drama, mainly because of the investigative murder mystery that lingers throughout the season, but also because of the racism, xenophobia, and bigotry undertone that the show carries within its story. And my compliments to Carnival Row directors and writers for tackling those tough issues in a way that covers all the grounds head-on under the guise of a Romeo and Juliet-esque love story. Audiences generally enjoy romances between two people whom, according to society, are not meant for each other. So there is no better, more effective illustration through which we can remind the world that we all share more things in common than our differences. Orlando Bloom plays human detective Inspector Rycroft Philostrate, a former Burke soldier, now investigating the gruesome murders that have threatened the peace in the Row. Cara Delevingne plays a fairy named Vignette Stonemoss, who shares a past or a history with Philo, but they try to keep that a secret because the increasingly intolerant society that they live in looks down on and doesn't take too kindly to such communions between humans and mythological creatures. Right from the start of the first episode, the tone is set that Carnival Row is a show that doesn't hold back on its violence and graphic nudity and its coarse language. So while this may be a fantasy world filled with creatures that you would usually mention in the bedtime stories that you tell to your nephews and nieces, this is by no means a show for their demographic. This is not The Hobbit. This is not Lord of the Rings. Carnival Row is meant for adult audiences only. But also along with that, it's also said from the start of the first episode that the humans and the creatures bear, at the very least, suspicion, if not animosity towards one another, which is understandable because empires of man have either invaded or got rid of the creatures from their own exotic homeland, and by got rid of, I mean murder them. So the show's effort to generate empathy lands right from the start. The reason why I said earlier on that this show covers all the grounds is because it does exactly that. Carnival Row addresses all the facets and the nuances that come with racism, bigotry, and xenophobia. So to see all of those covered on this show while fully knowing that those things unfortunately also continue to happen in our world today, it does make the whole thing feel eerie and prophetic, considering the fact that Travis Beacham wrote the original script more than a decade ago. But you can't deny the parallels. The characters on this show represent groups of people in our society that respond one way or another to racism, bigotry, and xenophobia. They are either on the receiving end, or they are the oppressors. But Travis and his co-writers make sure that these characters live in the gray areas and that they have redemptive qualities should they choose it. David Gaius' character, Agreus, represents those who, even though they are wealthy and incredibly successful, they still cannot be fully accepted in their own society simply because of who they are. Tamsin Merchant plays a young aristocrat named Imogen that represents those who feel like they are superior by all accounts, but when they are down on their luck, they are forced to seek help from those who they usually mock. Simon McBurney plays a traveling showman named Runyon, and his storyline deals with illegal immigration and deportation. Cara Delevingne's character, Vignette, represents refugees who feel deeply concerned about cultural appropriation, and Orlando Bloom's character, Philo, represents those with identity crisis who feel like there is more to their existence and lineage than their past lets on. So each of those characters either feels like they don't belong in that world, or that they deserve to be in that world, and they would do whatever they can to stay there. Now, there's another aspect to the overall story as well, involving Caroline Ford and Jared Harris and Artie Frauchen's characters. This one is geared more towards the politics and the power struggle happening within the halls of the parliament. So this one represents the policies pushed for or against the immigrants, or in this case, the creatures. And some of them might be ideologies that are quite extreme and fringe, but they might see their rise to power soon enough. So that's what I mean by this show covering all the grounds. It's as if Travis and his co-writers have taken everything under consideration and they left no stones unturned. I think they did a good job of exploring those aspects within just 8 episodes, which I think are a fair amount. The acting, in my opinion, is also outstanding, especially in the case of David Gaius and Tamsin Merchant. David Gaius exudes gravitas, and his performance is like an immovable rock. Tamsin Merchant is terrific at being sly and manipulative and disingenuous. Their storyline might seem like a secondary plot, but while I was watching those two characters, not for 1 second did I ever consider them to be a distraction. Not for 1 second did I ever consider it to be an unnecessary, pointless detour. Because the Agrius and Imogen storyline is just as compelling, and it's just as engaging, and it's just as integral to the overall themes that Carnival Row wants to convey. I also enjoy the interactions between Caroline Ford and Artie Frauchen, which could get a bit testy at times. Their arguments and their conversations play out like some sort of Shakespeare in the Park. Prior to this, I never thought much of Cara Delevingne as an actress, mainly because her previous gigs did not impress me. And don't get me even started on that shit show Suicide Squad. But here on Carnival Row, it's as if Cara finally connects with her performing skills. Plus, she seems to be destined for this role. I cannot think of any other people that could pull off Vignette. Cara is fierce and undeterred whenever her character Vignette feels defensive or protective of her culture. So it's fun watching Cara slowly but surely have me sold as an actress capable of emotional range. This obviously is not the first time that Orlando Bloom ever dabbles in the fantasy world. Lord of the Rings! Sorry, there's something stuck there in my throat. Orlando Bloom as Philo, however, is miles away or nowhere near Orlando Bloom as Legolas. Bloom as Philo is gloomy and moody, and he often walks around with his thoughts occupied. Bloom gives a mostly calm and stoic performance throughout this season. Do I have some criticism about this show? Yes, and without spilling any spoilers, I do think that the writers somewhat dropped the ball a bit when it comes to trying to convince us that Philo is a great detective. Because the way Philo ultimately puts the two and two together mostly happens by way of dreams or hunches, rather than deducing or reasoning. Most of the time, the conclusion just suddenly comes to him without him exerting much effort. There are also other parts about the murder mystery that indicates to me that this is the show's weakest link. And again, without spilling spoilers, as you know, Travis Beacham is the same guy who gave you and me the movie Pacific Rim. So there's a part on Carnival Row that uses a familiar concept from that film, let's put it that way. And I find that to be disappointing. They could have gone for something fresh and new and unexpected, but instead they went for recycling Travis's signature style, which again goes back to my point about the murder mystery. It seems to be this show's weakest link. But having said all that, I do believe that the downside does not take away from the show's overall appeal, which I think will resonate with a lot of fans, whether or not you like stories that are set in a fantasy world. Because, as I implied earlier, the Romeo and Juliet-esque forbidden romances used as a tool to tell us that we are far more similar than we are different, I think that that effort will pay off. If the mystery doesn't draw you in, the relationship between these characters will definitely have you hooked, because the show does a hell of a job of making you care about them. What a riveting and marvelous new series. Carnival Row is a must-see.